Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and today I've got my friend Armando Venditti from Sea of Tranquility. How are you?
Doing good. How are you, Peter?
Fantastic. Today we are going to do Queen, the game from 1980. Now, this is one of my favorite Queen albums, so I thought I'd get Armando on the show, do a deep dive into the individual tracks, what we like, what we don't like, and just a general overview of the album. So, Armando, what do you think
Yes, sir.
of the Queen the Game, or maybe some context as you first heard this album?
What do I think of Queen in the Game? Well, I think it's a very good album. I just to give a bit of a background on the album. It was released June 30th of 1980. It hit 11. It reached number 11 in the Australian charts, and it was number one in the UK charts, US charts, and Canadian charts. So it was a hit right off the bat in terms of reaching the masses. It sold 700,000 copies in Canada just in the first couple of months of release. So this was when Queen it was quoted as them being white hot in North America, and especially Canada. So what do I think of the album? I think it's a good album. There's a lot more space on the album in terms of playing and the arrangements. It's a more of a straightforward rock album, instead of the elaborate, arrangements and vocal harmonies, etc. I think it's a really good album.
Yeah.
Had
Okay.
three major singles on, two major singles and one not so major single off the album, being Crazy Little Thing Called Love, that was released in '79 before the album came out. And then it was another one, Bites the Dust, which was a
Yeah.
3 million seller, 3
Abs-
million copies sold.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Look, as I said, I think this is one of my favorite Queen albums. I first was acquainted with this album with the two singles. Obviously, Crazy Little Thing Called Love was a huge hit in Australia.
monster hit.
It was like number one for at least 2 months. That fabulous film clip with Freddie and the dancers hamming it up. We'll talk more about that when we get into the deep dive in the songs. But yeah, I think the video clip clearly propelled the single into the stratosphere, and that sold so many units. And then another one, Bites the Dust, which it was a breakthrough sonically for this for Queen into a whole different direction. Maybe that was a good thing or a bad thing, depending how you fall in the Queen ledger.
Depends who you ask. Yes, it just depends
Yes,
who you ask. Yes.
yeah, two monster songs on this album that perhaps tower over the rest of the album, but there are some really tasty deep cuts. And I think that if I was going to recommend a Queen album to somebody that had never heard Queen,
I would
I, w-
recommend
I,
this.
I would push them into this album because there's a bit for everybody. Why don't we do the deep dive? We'll go song by song, and yeah, we'll just take it from there. So the first song is Play the Game, which is a Freddie Mercury composition. What do you think of this song?
I think that this is one of the more straightforward rock type of tracks. It's a very emotional vocal delivered by Freddie. It starts, and first of all, it must be said, they were working on just a little bit more background. They were working on two albums at the same time in 1980. This album, The Game, that came out in June, and the soundtrack to Flash Gordon. Spoiler alert, I like Flash Gordon. Deal with it. I'm sorry, I do.
I like Flash Gordon too.
Not you, Peter. I'm just referring to other people who are going to comment and
It's all
about
good.
against Flash Gordon. Don't. In terms of that, they this album, it's stated that in the notes, that in liner notes, that this album has the first appearance of an Oberheim synthesizer that was used on during their work for the Flash Gordon soundtrack, and they liked using synthesizers, so they figured they would start using it on their, on their other catalog that were going to amass going forward. The album's the track starts off with I guess you called it ascending synthesizer lines that come in, and almost like a spaceship landing kind of feel, from Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Absolutely. Kind of. And that sound is all the way through that soundtrack.
And
that synthesizer sound.
Yeah. You mean the Flash Gordon soundtrack?
Yes, Flash Gordon soundtrack.
Yeah. But with Play the Game, as said, it starts with I guess you call it, again, ascending keyboard runs, and it just comes in and almost like a dead stop, and then Freddie's vocals come in, very lush, very almost close to the mic, almost like he's standing so close to the mic you can almost hear him breathing into the mic, and it's just a very emotional love song to an extent, from Freddie to whoever he was dating at the time.
Yeah, there he is.
Yes. Nice shot from the album cover. Yes. And it has the trademark Queen vocals, like Queen harmony vocals. And Brian May had said that at that time, when they would start the shows on their tours, they would basically start off with, We Will Rock You, the fast version, and Let Me Entertain You, and like basically come in, hit them quick right in the chest with a good, a couple of rockers, and then just slow things down with like Play the Game, almost like settling in for the show. And I would agree with that. And it's just an amazing. Freddie to me does an over the top vocal performance on this, because he hits those notes. He goes up in the higher register, and then he just comes back down into his normal register, and it's almost like he's taking you on a roller coaster ride, sonically, like vocally. And I love it. I think it's great. Unfortunately, it only hit 42 in the charts.
Yeah. I think it's a great song. I think it's a great opener. And to me, I see a lineage to Bohemian Rhapsody. You've got the pianos, and then you've got and then you've got a little bit of it when it comes into the crash bang wallop of the guitar and the drums. And when I say lineage, a slight lineage. Yeah. So let's look through the checklist. It's got the beautiful harmonies, tick. It's got the beautiful thick guitar, symphonic guitar tone of Brian May, tick. And it's just beautifully mastered. And kudos for this album. It was engineered or produced by Queen and Reinhold Mack, who was famous for ELO, Sparks, and
Dawn of Summer.
So he's got that, look at ELO, that symphonic, that big, larger than life sound. And this is just in spades in this album.
Yes, I agree with you. And it's got to be said that Brian May has gone on record as saying that when they first started working with Mac as a producer, when they would run through a recording or do overdubs or whatever, they basically would play a song anywhere from like up to a dozen times to get it perfect. When they started working with Mac, he started to do or introduced what he called the drop-in method, where you didn't have to play an entire guitar solo from start to finish all the time. You could just play that certain section that maybe you didn't think was right, a little snippet, and then just sort of drop it in. And it, doing the drop-in technique. And it took Brian May a little bit of time to get used to doing that kind of recording. But I think he brought a different sonic view to the recording process with Queen.
But this song's got bombast, and I love Queen bombast.
Oh yeah, there's bombast.
And I mean, in Bohemian Rhapsody, my favorite part of the song is the bombast bit. and it's got this in spades. So I think it's a great opener. And I love that you brought, you mentioned about the synthesizer, because that really adds weight to the song and adds to the bombast when the synthesizer comes in, play the game,
Like in the middle section. Yeah. With the,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it goes from 0 to 60
yep.
in seconds in terms of ramping it up, like in terms of going from one end to the other. No, it's great. It's a great track.
Lyrically, it's a typical Mercury lyric. I don't think it's terribly deep. It sort of talks about everyone play the game of love, but as a song, I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's a great opener.
Yeah, I mean, Freddie Mercury went from the 70s of singing, about mystical themes, demons and dragons and sorcerers, and which I loved. I loved. But then he also went into the, like speaking in the first person, in terms of relationships with
more personal things, and
more personal,
and maybe drawing in things that was happening to him in his life, either
very
directly
so.
or indirectly. So
very much so, yeah.
All right. The second one is Dragon Attack, which is a bit of a hard rocker. What do you think of this song?
Oh my God! You see, for me, this is the album where Queen got into more of a rhythmic, like R&B rhythmic kind of a feel, even before you hear Another One Bites the Dust. Dragon Attack is a rocker, but it's also has that R&B hook to it in terms of the bass line from John Deacon.
Oh, isn't he such an underrated bass player? And I miss him. I really do. I know. Look, I like.
Yeah.
I appreciate you got Queen and Adam Lambert, but there's one person missing, and it's Deacon.
Yeah.
So might talk about that later, but I agree.
Yeah. No. Yes, the track itself is, again, it's a mixture of, I call it slight R&B / rock, because you have the rhythmic bass line, very R&B influenced, and it's very prominent in the mix. And then you have the drums, and there's that section where Roger Taylor does that percussion overdub.
Yeah.
And then like it starts, and then when it comes to the end of that section of the percussion overdub, they start doing the panning from one side to the other, like they do the panning of the drums, and then it just goes back into the track, like splash, like like a drum hit, like a cymbal crash, and it goes back into the song, like and again the bass comes in again, like very sort of prominent, and basically John Deacon saying, "I'm over here, like listen to this," and there's a bit of a flourish on the bass.
Folks,
So,
this is a headphones album, and
bloody hell, yes, it is.
I was on a flight from the US, and I had this album on Spotify, and just playing it on the plane. And I agree with everything you've said. This is a really good headphones album, and everyone's killer on this track. Armando, Dragon Attack. Everyone's killer.
I love it, and then it has all the Queen trademarks. You've got the guitar solo, the guitar build-up solo from May, who wrote the song.
Yes.
And then you've got that breakdown with the vocals, with the gang, the group vocals on the harmonies with Freddie, and then it goes back into the song again, and it just sort of, it builds, and then it's sort of just slowly, the guitars are stripped away, and then it's just left with the drums and the bass, and it like a dead stop, like,
That's what I like about this album. I think it's a really, truly collaborative effort, because everyone's pitching in with the songwriting.
Yeah.
Every part is in the right place in respect of group effort and artistically in regards to this album.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it has to be said too, the way they would do it is somebody would come up with a song idea, and then other people would come in and bring ideas and try and change it and rearrange it. But the even though it may have been in the earlier days, even though it may have been a group effort, the person who brought the song in originally got the songwriting credit.
Yeah.
And the way they wanted to have it done was the way it was done. That was like the unwritten law, they called it.
Yeah. And there was some robust discussions, because I think I've heard a couple of YouTube clips of some studio chat where there's a little bit of banter amongst the band recording this, and a little bit adversarial, but I guess they're just trying to get their artistic vision there. So yeah.
This was where they started to slowly. I mean, I watched the episode yesterday with you and Grant on Grant's Rock Warehouse about Talk, and you had mentioned how this was the last great Queen album. I respect Grant, but I disagree. But this was where they started to slowly splinter in terms of how they wanted it done, how they wanted things done in terms of the recording processes. And yeah, you can start to see a bit of the disjointment coming on, but they pulled it together for this album. So
they did.
Yeah.
Well, the third track is a monster song. It's part of their, any song set that Queen would put together would definitely have this, and that's Another One Bites the Dust, which was a number one hit in US, UK, written by John Deacon off a John Deacon bass line. I love it. I think it's just brilliant. What do you think about this song?
I think it's a fantastic track. I think this is where the dissension starts to become more prominent, because it's basically a disco song. And when they were recording it, Roger Taylor basically said, "What the hell are you doing? Like, why are we doing this?" And he and John Deacon recorded the drum tracks on their own. And apparently he wanted they call it more of a dead sound on the drums. And like Taylor had to put tape on his drums on the snare in order to get that dead sound. And he hated doing that. So they never thought it was going to be released as a single. The bass line has been touted as being stolen from Chic Good Times, the track Good Times from Chic, because apparently John Deacon and if you read quotes from Bernard Edwards from Chic, that yes, John Deacon would hang around the studio with them while they were recording. And he said, yeah, he did steal that bass line, but he kind of turned it around a little bit upside down in terms of the arrangement.
He
but
did.
It's basically, I'm not taking anything away from the track. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a Queen fanatic. So I'm not coming down on Queen in any way. Yeah. I'm just saying that this is what has been touted in the media. The track was never supposed to be released as a single, but it's a fantastic track, and it's John Deacon that's playing the guitars on that track. It's not Brian May.
Yeah. So I don't think it's disco to my ears. I think it's more funk, a little bit of R&B. When I think of disco, there's always kind of a specific disco sort of little bit of cha-cha. I don't hear cha-cha in this, but I think it's definitely R&B. And ladies and gents, this is the stepping stone to the next album, because this was such an uber hit in America. I think that Freddie's ears were open then. Oh, hello. Let's explore this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Club sounds, dance music, R&B, funk.
Very much so. The record, it was Michael Jackson who suggested to them that they release it as a single, because he would go to their shows at the Forum when they were in town, and he'd say to them, "Look, you need to release as a single." And Roger Taylor at the time said, "You're nuts. This is not a single track. This is not." And he says, "No, you have to release it." It crossed over to the black audience, and people.
I was about to say that R&B charts.
Yeah. It crossed over to the R&B charts. that when it was released as a single, it was not released in a picture sleeve. So, and from Elektra in the States. So the black audience didn't know that Queen were a Caucasian band, so it opened them up to a whole new audience for that brief period of time.
Yeah.
And there's a hook to it. There's no way around it, ladies.
There's one of their hookiest songs. I have fond memories of watching Queen on that cheesy American music show, Solid Gold. Did you ever get that in Canada?
Oh yeah, that was a staple in my house.
Played that. Yeah,
that was a staple every Saturday night, 5:00. That bloody Solid Gold logo would come on the screen. I'm like, oh, it's on. So I remember that.
Solid Gold. No, that was part of pop culture. Most definitely.
And you can't get away from that.
Yeah. Interesting song structure. It's not like chorus verse, chorus verse, chorus verse. It's a very unusual song structure.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And another thing, a little bit of trivia, is there was this whole thing in the 80s about the evils of rock and roll. And if you reverse music, there are certain songs that have satanic messages. Like if you play Stairway to Heaven backwards, it talks about Satan.
Yeah.
And the devil. And this one, apparently, if you reverse it,
you hear the lyric, decide to smoke marijuana.
Smoke marijuana.
Yeah, decide to smoke marijuana. You hear that.
I actually did a scripture lesson at school, and we had this guy come in and he did a whole bit about the evils of rock and roll, and he played this as one of the demonstrations of backmasking. So just a little bit of trivia.
Yeah, that came out, and I just thought, yeah,
good grief.
Personally, I thought, holy shit. I thought, if you're going to sit there and take the time to listen to something backwards, you need a hobby. I'm sorry. You really do. You need a hobby.
I prefer to listen to music forwards, not backwards.
Exactly. You always, never go backwards, ladies and gentlemen. Always go forwards. So.
Yeah. All right. Next song, Need Your Love Tonight, another John Deacon. He's like the silent assassin. I love all of his songs. He's just... watch the quiet ones.
He didn't write many songs for the albums. Like he and Roger Taylor basically wrote in the early days. They wrote like maybe one or two songs per album. But when he wrote these songs, when he wrote his, look out. I mean,
he never wrote a bad song.
No. And I believe this is the one and only time that on a Queen album that John Deacon songs were back to back on an album, and it's basically a love letter to a jilted lover who was saying, you know what, I'm sorry, but I'm understanding now what you're telling me, and I made a mistake, and I should have understood where you were coming from the beginning. And it's just a very straightforward rock track, like very, overdubbing of guitars, a good harmony guitar solo in the center, and it's like 2 minutes and 45 seconds. It's a very quick jaunt, right? It was released as a single as well, but I don't think it did not do as well as, I think it was released in Canada. I'm not sure, but it didn't do as well as another one by Dust and Crazy Love and Called Love or The Game. I don't think it hit top 50, but I like the song. I like, it's just a good, feel good rock and roll song. There's no hidden messages anywhere to it.
Absolutely. And I like that lyric, no, I'll never look back in anger. Really heartfelt lyrics. Yeah. So, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. I have to learn to forgive and forget is another lyric that kind of, stands out for me. Sorry, but it's good.
But John Deacon, I think, as I said, watch the quiet ones. They're the ones that deliver the goods.
Yeah,
and he's produced he has come up with the biggest song on the album.
Quite by accident.
Whether by accident or not, but single-handedly changed the direction.
Mm-hmm. For better or worse, he did, yes, and he did. So it's good. It's good.
So number 5 is the other uber hit that I spoke about at the start of the show, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Freddie Mercury. I think it's fun. It's a fun song. Do you like it?
I like it. It's a very memorable tune, very catchy hook to it. Just
throwback to the 50s, pistache.
Very rockabilly.
It's
a rockabilly oriented kind of track. The story was that Freddie Mercury was having a bath, and he came up with the chord structure for the track, and he screamed to an assistant, get me a guitar, right away. So he literally wrote the song in the bath.
Soap suds flying everywhere while he's strumming the guitar.
Exactly. So he literally went to the studio. This was when he first met Mac at the studio. He went to the studio. They were going to start recording. So he went to the studio. Mac turned up and he said, look, I have this idea for the song. I want to record it. I want to get my parts down before Brian shows up and does his bit. But it's a very catchy, memorable track, very hooky, good sort of Elvis type of crooning from Freddie doing the double tracking. And again, it was done very much off the cuff, like very on the fly, on the spot, and I think it's the first time, one and only time that Brian May plays a Telecaster on the track. He doesn't play the Red Special. He uses a Telecaster that belonged to Roger Taylor, of all people, because Roger Taylor is a multi-instrumentalist, as they all were. So yeah, it's a fantastic piece of work, and it was released in '79, and it was a #1 hit in Canada and in the US. And then when it hit #1, they thought, oh my God, a #1 single. We got to finish the album. Like, they were in the middle of recording the album at the same time. So they were like rushing to get the album finished, to get it released. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, this song, I'm just wondering, there was a little bit of a mini revival in the UK of rockabilly. Yeah. And you had a couple of artists that became quite huge, had a lot of hits on the back of, of singers that look like Elvis with the coiffed hair and playing that rockabilly type of songs. I'm talking about Shakin' Stevens. I'm talking about Matchbox Major or Major Matchbox. Okay. I don't know if that ever came over to the US. I know you had the Stray Cats, but I'm just wondering, did this song single-handedly revive that sort of stream of music?
Not really in Canada. I've heard of Shakin' Stevens, but I haven't. I really don't believe it. It sort of had a movement in terms of rockabilly in Canada.
Yeah. But in England, Shakin' Stevens and Major Matchbox had some huge hits, and it was all of that. It was like a 50s revival. Yeah. And I was just reflecting, and I'm thinking, did this song sort of spur that sort of movement?
I think maybe
because it was quite big for a while.
Yeah, it was. And I think it probably did in the UK. It's been said that John Lennon had said that when he heard that song, when you heard Crazy Little Thing Called Love, it inspired him to get back in the studio and start doing some work. Whether that's true or not, it's all conjecture, I guess. But
yeah.
But no, I think it's a fantastic song. It's a very quick song. It's not overly complex in terms of arrangement, in terms of presentation, in terms of production. But it kind of does stand out from the rest of the album, which is a good thing. I mean, you want stuff you want music. If you want to release singles, you want to release singles that are going to best represent the record to the mass media, mass audience. And this did that.
And there's the imagery, and you basically, all that imagery is sort of a lineage from that video clip, where you got the levers and, they're all like in that sort of, okay, Brian May's got the long hair, obviously, but Freddie's very much, looking like the rocker from that film clip. So
yeah, that image, the album cover photo, is directly from the video shoot from Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
Yeah. What do you think of the album cover, by the way? I find the silver album covers kind of scuff over the years. It used to be kind of semi-reflective, but it's not one that sort of keeps over time. What do you think of it?
I think maybe they could have done better in terms of the presentation of the album cover. I mean, but on the reverse side of that, I think the album cover, as a stripped down album cover, I think that this is a reflection of what's going to be on the vinyl, like the type of music that you're going to get on the vinyl. The arrangements, ladies and gentlemen, are very sparse. There's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of space to do things in the music. Sorry, 1 cup of coffee today, and I'm not doing great. In terms of explaining myself, but I think reflecting on it now, I think the album cover is indicative of what is on the album itself in terms of music.
Sure. So. All right, number 6 is Rocket, which is a Roger Taylor number.
Rocket Prime Jive, yes.
So what do you think of that one?
I bloody love it. I think it's your typical, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's your typical Roger Taylor fare. It starts out with a guitar intro, very slow, and Freddie is on lead vocals. And then it just kicks into like a blister, in my opinion, a very blistering rock track. Heavy drums, it basically propels you forward. It's like you're on a roller coaster ride with this song, and you don't know where you're going to end up. You're going to get to the end of it, or you're going to fall off. You don't know, right? And there's a guitar solo from Brian May that it's almost like he's losing control of the guitar. Like it starts off with like a couple of 2 or 3 chords, like, and then it's sort of like he can't control the guitar, and then he sort of grabs hold and he goes into the main solo, and it comes back out into the song again, into the verses and stuff, and it almost again like he can't control the guitar, right? And then he just grabs hold of it and he's like, okay, I got you now, and he does the solo. So I think it's just an amazing piece of work. And you hear the keyboards coming in at the very tail end of the song, and then you hear on the back end of the vocals, you hear Roger Taylor doing his little call and answer to Freddie Mercury and Brian May's their part. We want some prime jive. You hear those lyrics. I'm not going to sing because I can't sing for shit. But when you hear Freddie Mercury and Brian May saying, "We want some prime jive," you hear Roger Taylor in the background doing like a little bit of a vocal.
Yeah, I want rock and roll. I want rock and roll. Yeah,
exactly, right. And when to the end of the song, when it comes in, like the keyboards come in, like you hear the keyboards, like you hear that synth line, and it's at the very peak, and you think it's about to explode because it's at the very end. It just sort of stops, and then you hear Roger just end the song very quietly, So, I mean, there's a lot of dynamic going on in this album, too.
I think there's a lot going on in this song, isn't it?
As straightforward as it is, there's a lot of dynamics going on, too, like a lot of highs and lows, a lot of, musical interplay, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I think it's their new wave song. And I think this is another precursor to the next album. So it's another direction. Yeah. So I agree. It's a typical Roger Taylor sort of number. But what I like about it is with the bass line and the synth line, the synth and the bass, it's got it to me, it's all right in that wheelhouse of new wave. And it's uber catchy.
Yeah, and very much so. And again, this is like, 3 years after punk. So when punk was really big, and Roger Taylor has always had in the early Queen albums has always had the more rock, like heavier rock oriented tracks.
He's the rock guy.
Yeah,
I've always found him as more of a rock guy than everyone. So. Everyone's got personality. They've got their own sort of personalities in the band. Freddie is Freddie, and John's the quiet one, and Brian's the studious, intellectual, mysterious guitar maestro. But I've always thought that Taylor's the rock guy. He's the guy that would be in the back drinking scotch on the rider and, converting with the women and all that sort of thing. He's the rock dude.
Yeah, it's got to be said to me, for me, being a fan, I guess you'd say I'm an Uber fan, but being a fan, when I would hear a Queen album, I would hear the tracks and say, okay, this is a Freddie composition. This is a Brian May composition.
Without knowing who.
Yeah, exactly. And the album that I did that with was Hot Space. I could listen to Hot Space and know, okay, Staying Power, that's Freddie. Dancer, that's Brian May. Action This Day, that's Roger Taylor, kind of thing. And I was right most of the time. And you could always tell. Roger always had songs that were more rhythm guitar oriented, more heavy. And this track, Rocket Prime Drive, just like propels you along. It just pushes you. There's an immediacy to it. Like, listen to me, listen to what I'm telling you, let's all have a good time and just forget everything and just have some fun, for the next 4 minutes.
No, it's got his personality in spades. The wild rocker, out there, and the extrovert. So I like it. I like it a lot. Right. Now, as much as I love this album, and it is my favorite, there is one particular track that I think is an absolute stinker. And I don't like it at all. Okay. So sorry, folks, but I really don't like Don't Try Suicide. I think it is a very awkward, mawkish, wrongly conceived song. What do you think of this one, Armando? I don't like it at all.
Well, first of all, it's very rare that you have an album, even from a favorite band. It's very rare that you would have an album that you like every single song at the same level, to the same degree on every album. And it's got to be said, Don't Try Suicide, even on the count, and he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, boom, and then the hand claps come in. And then you hear the bass, that thumping bass. Like, I think he does like a slapping bass technique on the bass. It's good. Over time, has it stood the test of time? No, I really don't. I mean, I'll listen to it. But yeah.
I think it's like a third-rate commercial jingle. And, you're talking about a really powerful topic here about suicide. And you've got this upbeat, about Don't Try Suicide. It's just totally wrong, and this would be a better album if it wasn't there. I can't understand it, and I've always skipped this track and just I don't like it at all.
I mean, I hope I'm not going to get in trouble here or get you in trouble, but when it's a serious subject matter, and then he says, baby, when you do it, all you do is get on my tits. It's like, so you're trying to take the piss out of something that is a serious
it's
topic.
Wrong.
So I mean, I'll listen to it. It's but it's not what you would say a Queen classic, even for a studio.
I think it's bottom shelf Queen. And Mercury, love him. He could be, a lazy writer at his worst. When he's on fire, he pulls out really good lyrics. He's a good lyricist, but this one is definitely bottom shelf. And I think that it's just mawkish and ill-conceived.
Yeah, I think.
And it sticks out.
And in context, I think it has to do with the fact that this was a point in time where they were entering their lazy period. And they would tell you that themselves in terms of, working in the studio. They were getting on each other's nerves in terms of, sometimes they wouldn't work in the studio together.
Well, I think this is definitely a throwaway, and maybe I mean the album up to now, 1 to 6, love every song, but this one just sticks out, and you just
I would agree.
Yeah.
And you know, and also like a little tidbit, this was the B-side in America to another one by Sadas.
Wow.
So and in Europe, Dragon Attack was the B-side to another one by Sadas.
I just remember even when I was a kid, so like 9 or 10 years old, and just buying the album or listening to the album, and even then with my young, not advanced ears, hearing this song and just going, no, it's just not right. There's something a bit just doesn't fit. All right, enough said about that one. Then we get back on track with a beautiful song called Sail Away, Sweet Sister. Brian May composition. What do you think of this one, Armando?
I think it's a fantastic piece of work. I mean, it starts off with the sounds of the ocean coming in, and then you hear the synth line coming in and the piano, and it's just a very emotional vocal delivered by Brian May.
Yes.
You know, and then you hear Freddie Mercury coming in the midsection. I guess you call it the middle 8 section, the bridge. Just a very, you know, it's the song overall is very emotional. It's a very heartfelt lyric, delivered in a very emotional way by Brian May. And I'm surprised that this wasn't released as a single, because I think this could have been, you know, maybe not a major hit, but I think it could have been a hit, you know.
Well, I'm of the view there's probably nine songs on this album that could have been released as singles in some shape or form. I think this is a lot of 9 singles and a dud that make up the album. And this is a beautiful, this could have been pushed as a ballad hit.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Like I guess you call it like a power ballad, you know, but, and then, you know, it's gotta be said, the bass lines, I mean, John Deacon is talking with the bass, like he's speaking through the bass, you know, in terms of his bass lines, and even how the song ends, like on the outro, you have the ocean coming back in, the sounds of the ocean coming back in, you know, crashing against the rocks, and it just fades out very slowly, you know. And I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic song.
This was the part inspiration, I think, musically, for Sweet Child of Mine. Guns N' Roses. As you're aware, Axl was a huge Queen fan.
Queen were one of his Bibles. And he is, if you call it that, and he is, I mean, he has basically just broken into the chorus of Sail Away, Sweet Sister, and then they'll go into Sweet Child of Mine, you know, in concert. But yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic piece of work. And quite literally, they, just a little footnote, the local rock station, K97 here in Edmonton, one weekend had a Queen weekend. And they played this album track. One afternoon, it was a Saturday afternoon. I literally was getting out of the car, and I said to Bob, stop a second, hold on. Is it? Yeah, it's Sail Away, Sweet Sister. I'm like, and he's like, okay, well, that's great. Let's go. But they never played this song on the radio.
The days when radio stations used to play album tracks.
Yes.
Those days are just long gone, but I would have stopped the car too. Wow, this is not a single.
Like, what's wrong with taking a chance once in a while and just playing something different? You know, like an album track. So yeah, no, I love this song.
Yeah,
I love this song,
and it's nice to hear May's voice, because you can understand when you hear the vocals or the lead vocals of some of the other non-Freddie Mercury, you know, sort of members of the band. You can see why their harmonies are so beautiful, because they can all sing and sing beautifully.
They could deliver a harmony vocal like no one's business.
There's no other bands in that sort of rock environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. They were an early precursor of this sort of sound where you had the hard rock and the harmony vocals. They were very credible, but Queen took it to that next level in that sort of hard rock space.
Yeah, it must be said that, just a little sidebar, that their basis for doing what they did was they didn't believe that there was a group out there that delivered a hard rock, like that delivered hard rock as a foundation with beautifully textured harmony vocals on top. They didn't think that there was a band out there that was doing that, and they wanted to be one of the first that did that. I mean, yes, you had Yes doing that, in the progressive rock field, but
and Uriah Heep.
And Uriah Heep, yes. Sorry, forgive me for that, for omitting Uriah Heep. But they wanted to be one of the first bands that really delivered that to their audience as a package overall, and I think they succeeded overall.
100%. Right, so we're getting to the business end. So you've got another Taylor composition coming soon. And again, it's got his personality in spades. Out there, extrovert,
yes,
bit of a stomper.
Very bottom heavy, very bass drum driven and bass guitar driven. I mean, the song starts out with the intro with the bass drum, but it's got I call it a spiral intro, like the recording technique, how they did it in the mixing. And then it just breaks into the song, and you do hear Taylor on the backing vocals on the intro, but then you hear he and Freddie Mercury share the lead vocals kind of, but you do hear Freddie more prominent. And again, you also hear a very, not overly, I don't want to say overly complicated, complex guitar solo from May, but just a fun song, just a good rollicking rock song.
Yeah.
And even on the outro, it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then it just stops dead with their harmony vocal together. Like, he and Freddie do it together on the very end, on the end of it, and it just stops dead. So you have a lot of dynamic in this one track, in terms of the arrangements, in terms of the playing, and production overall. So yeah, I think it's fantastic.
I think it's a throwback to UK early 70s glam. I hear a bit of Slade, bit of Sweet, maybe the Glitter Band. It's got that real, sort of glam stomp about it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I would agree.
Yeah. And let's face it, Queen started in that era. They started in, the early 70s.
Yes.
And when they started, they were in the middle of that glam period. Not that they were glam. Well, but
they were considered glam in the beginning, but I mean, Mick Rock, who was their photographer for like the first 4 albums, he said that David Bowie did glam like no one's business, but Queen took it to another level, like surpassed it. Bands like, Sweet and etc. Queen just sort of took it and ran with it to an extent on their own.
Yeah, well, I guess what I was thinking when I think of glam, as I said, I think of Slade, Sweet, the Gary Glitter Band, Susie Quattro, where you got those really compressed 3-minute stompy songs with a hook. But yeah, look, they started in that era, and I just think this is a lovely sort of reminisce of that bygone era.
Back in the day, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right. So the business end, and you've got a Brian May song, and Save Me. And it kind of bookend with Play the Game. I find those two songs quite similar.
Yeah. Yeah, when I think of the lyric right now, like it starts off with Freddie, it started off so well. They said we made a perfect pair. You know, was to say, I clothed myself in your glory and your love. How I loved you, how I cried. So he's basically saying to his partner, and like, why did it end? Why did it have to end so? And I think it's just a beautiful, emotional song.
Yeah.
And I think it ends the album very well. I mean, it has, there's a middle section that almost like a very, I call it like a very ethereal guitar solo section, sorry, from Brian May.
Yeah.
And it goes into a nice solo.
But musically kind of similar. And I think it's sort of like a bookend. So you've got two very similar songs, start, finish, and then it works away in. I think this album's quite nicely sequenced. Except there's one song I'd like to
omit. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think I think I'm sorry, I didn't mean, if I cut in before, if I interrupted you, I apologize profusely. I think that the sequencing of this album is perfect. It takes you, again, all the Queen albums take you for me, take me on a journey, on an emotional journey. And you never really ever know where you're going to end up. And I like that about every album. But this album, for that reason, I think it's a very well-rounded album. Some people say that it's a hit or miss album. It's more a hit than miss for me. I think it has all the Queen trademarks, all the harmony vocals, and they were going for something different. There was a point where when they recorded News of the World, where Taylor said, this was where News of the World was where Queen were kicked up the backside, because they thought maybe the rich textured harmony vocals and the guitar orchestrations, maybe that wasn't what was going on at the time, and that what people wanted. So he came up with Sheer Heart Attack for News of the World. I think they wanted to, for this album, they wanted to go maybe divert a little bit away from the again, the rich harmony vocals on the guitar orchestrations, and just concentrate on a rock album, like
a little bit more stripped back, but bigger sound. I mean, it's funny. Some of it is really, they've still got a little bit of bombast, but a lot of the songs are very stripped back and more in that rock sphere. But
very much so. There's room to breathe.
Yeah.
On this album musically, and I think they hit the nail on the head. That they knocked it out of the park in terms of what they brought to the public, and I think it worked.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's my favorite album. And I think, as I said earlier in the show, if I was going to introduce somebody that hadn't been familiar with Queen, I would choose this album because it's got everything. Throwback to rockabilly, new wave. You've got the early bombast, Bohemian Rhapsody. You've got the straight ahead rockers. You've got the balladry. You've got the harmonies. It's got everything. So this album, to me, has all the elements of Queen that I love and the public love. And the public embrace this because it's one of their highest selling albums.
Yes.
So maybe Critics' Corner, there's a lot of people that sort of think, oh, it's commercial and this is where they jump the shark. But to me, this is the sweet spot. This is not where
they jump the shark.
This is the sweet spot. And simply, even just for the two hit singles, another one, Bites the Dust, and Crazy Little Thing Called Love, this is, there's a lot there for it.
And conversely, like you were saying, this would be the album that, and I really didn't think about this until we started doing the show and taping. that this would be the album that you would introduce to somebody for, in terms of a more accessible album to get into for Queen. Conversely, I would say if I wanted to introduce someone into more of the harmony, thick harmony textures and the guitar orchestrations, I would introduce them to Queen too. You know, because
perhaps,
yeah, it's more of they're opposites. They're almost like polar opposites. So I mean, yeah, I would agree. If I wanted to give someone a more accessible album to introduce them to, it would be this.
Yeah,
right.
you know, a little bit of funk. As I said, this has got everything. It's just a very broad musical palette. But sure, those early albums from a hard rock perspective, they're fantastic. But this one, for me, hits the sweet spot because of my musical tastes are pretty broad, and it's always hit the sweet spot for me.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Armando, as always, this has been a great chat, a fantastic deep dive into the albums. We'll do this again. Viewers, we'll come up with something, a little an album in a couple of weeks. But tell us what you think of this album. Is this your favorite Queen album? I don't know. Just put your comments down. Tell us what you think. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Check Armando on Sea of Tranquility. He does some fantastic stuff. Collector's Corner, The Prog Seat. Yeah, just wonderful stuff. We will both catch up with you very soon. Cheers.
Have a good day.